The police department received a call from the lab advising that the blood they found under the jump seat in the frame was that of Rachel Newhouse. So at that point, we knew Rex Krebs was our suspect.
Hobson returned to the jail to interview Rex Krebs one more time.
Eventually, I got around to showing him an 8-ball keychain that had been found during the search of his home. I then confronted him with his jump seat and told him we found blood underneath it. And when I told him it was Rachel Newhouse's blood, he became silent, and he remained silent for about 45 minutes. He didn't want to talk.
Eventually, Rex Krebs revealed the awful truth.
Rachel Newhouse and Andrea Crawford, right? Okay, are you responsible for the disappearance of both girls? Are we going to find either girl alive? That was a no? Okay.
At that point, he spent the next 3 hours telling me what he did, how he did it, how he killed Rachel and Andrea.
Krebs confessed to following Rachel Newhouse on the night of November 12th as she walked home alone.
Okay, when you say you attacked her, what do you mean attacked her?
I terminally hit her.
Okay, now she's unconscious laying on the bridge. What happens?
I grabbed her and drug her down to my truck. Yeah.
How'd you drag her?
There, here.
Krebs then confessed to stalking Andrea Crawford for weeks before finally breaking into her apartment one night.
So now the screen's gone, it's in your truck, the window's open. What do?
Crawled in.
How do you go in? Head first, feet first?
Gate first.
He actually strained some muscles in his rib cage doing that, and that's what Dave Zaragoza, his parole officer, noticed when he was injured. It wasn't from falling on the wood pile, it was from crawling through that window and arching his back.
Mary Hobson's role is absolutely crucial in this case because it was Hobson who got Krebs to talk. And Hobson only was able to do that by establishing a rapport with Krebs. And Krebs sort of felt like he could trust Hobson and talk to him.
I'm sure he did a lot of things to those 2 young ladies that we still don't know about, that he's never told anybody about. But if he thought we could prove it, he was willing to talk about it. But he was pretty explicit in what he did, how he did it, and why he did it.
On April 23rd, 1999, Rex Krebs agreed to show investigators where the bodies were buried.
Oh yeah, did you do that, Rex? We got it, Rex.
I explained to him the parents, the loved ones, wanted some closure, and I wanted him to take us out and show us where he buried them. And he was willing to do that. So he took us out to Davis Canyon and went right to the spot where he had buried Rachel, about a mile from his house, up on the hillside about 50 yards. He then took us to his house and pointed out where Andrea's body was, about 30 feet from his back door.
Well, my initial reaction was that I felt really bad and very sad for the family and what those 2 young ladies went through. Almost simultaneously, you have a feeling of joy because now you know that the guy responsible for those crimes is in custody and nobody else will be victimized by him. It was something I've never experienced before, that emotional roller coaster that quickly.
Rex Krebs was charged with multiple counts of abduction, rape, and murder. Krebs pled not guilty, blaming his violent sexual urges on an abusive childhood and alcoholism.
Rex Krebs said he's suffering from a psychological disorder called sexual sadism, and his defense team's argument during the trial was that he couldn't control his actions and that he had these fantasies about raping women that were just overwhelming and he couldn't stop. And eventually he had to act those fantasies out.
In 2001, Rex Krebs was convicted of the kidnap, rape, and murder of Rachel Newhouse and Andrea Crawford. Today, Krebs is on California's death row. Since his conviction, the state has changed the way it keeps track of sex offenders on parole.
Back in 2006, Proposition 83 was voted in by the voters of the state of California, which required the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to attach GPS tracking devices to all sex offenders that are currently on parole. And as of recently, I believe there's about 7,000 sex offenders that are being tracked by GPS on parolees that are released from prison.
When we continue, a mother shares her anguish.
She was walking to her car, talking to Chris on the cell phone, and suddenly the phone went dead.
A talented art student with a promising future. A twice convicted sex offender, fresh from prison. At number 4 on our list, a tragedy that might have been prevented. The disappearance of Dru Sjodin. As a child, Dru Sjodin was always outgoing.
Well, Dru was, I think, everybody's friend. I always said that she could talk to the pulp, to a pulper. She'd light up a room anytime or any place she walked in.
In school, Dru developed an interest in the arts. By her senior year at the University of North Dakota, Dru looked forward to a career as a photographer. But first, she wanted to travel.
She was, at the time, planning on taking a trip to Australia in the spring for a photography class.
Dru held down 2 jobs to help pay for her trip. On the day she vanished, Dru got off work and did a little shopping. Security cameras showed Dru leaving the mall. She was on her cell with her boyfriend.
She was walking to her car from the mall entrance, talking to Chris on the cell phone, and suddenly he heard, okay, okay, and the phone went dead.
Chris, her boyfriend, called the apartment at 5:30 and said, "Hey, is Dru there? I was on the phone with her on her cell phone, and it just kind of ended weird, and I'm just kind of concerned about it."
Police records revealed a second call from Dru's cell phone to her boyfriend at 7:42 p.m.
When he answered the phone, all he could hear was beep, 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 like somebody pushing buttons.
At 9 o'clock, her manager from her second job called and said, "Is Dru there? She's late." And at that point, I called the police. I just said, I think my roommate is missing. I don't know who else to call.
Meg Flatagraph filed a missing persons report. The following morning, Dru's car was discovered in the mall parking lot.
It was unlocked. The purse that she had purchased was in there, and then her wallet and her identification was in there as well.
Police believe that Dru had been abducted.
Hair is frosted blonde, eyes are blue, height is 5'5", weight 140.
Cell phone records led police 27 miles outside Grand Forks to rural Minnesota, where Dru's phone had transmitted a signal to a tower.
We covered a lot of area. We worked from morning until dark, and it was cold, miserable, windy. It was a tough day to be out there.
Meanwhile, investigators examined a list of local sex offenders. One name stood out.
Alfonso Rodriguez had been sent to prison 23 years earlier on rape and attempted rape charges. When he was released, he was classified as a level 3 sex offender. Level 3 sex offenders are those who are most likely to reoffend.
Officers questioned Rodriguez, then got a warrant to search his car.
They went through it. They found some blood. They found a knife. The blood turned out to be the same type of Dru Sjodin.
On December 1st, 2003, Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. was arrested and charged with kidnapping Dru Sjodin. Rodriguez pled not guilty. The story attracted media from around the country as the search for Dru continued through the harsh winter.
I met Dru Sjodin's mother coming out of the command post. Something just compelled me to just walk up to her and put my arm around her, and I just said, "Mom," I said, I just want to promise you one thing. We'll never quit. We're going to keep on till we find her.
On April 17th, Deputy Dick Rue brought an end to the agonizing mystery.
I was walking up toward that little east ditch, and I spotted something that was black. I went down to take a closer look, and it turned out that the black spot, about the size of a hubcap perhaps, it was her coat. And she was under it. She was lying there in the ditch.
We got a call to come back to the command center, and that's when we ultimately knew that Dru had been found that day.
What's interesting about this case is because he took her across state lines, federal laws applied due to the interstate nature.
As a result, the case was transferred to federal court.
The hardest part of the story is that Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. served his sentence for his crime. He served 23 years. He was released because that's the way our system works. And it only took him 6 months before he destroyed an entire community.
In 2007, Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. was found guilty of the kidnap, rape, and murder of Dru Sjodin. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Linda Walker lobbied for a national sex offender registry. The law was signed by President George W. Bush in July 2006.
You never want to have anybody forget her. Not maybe necessarily the way she was taken, but the life that she led and how much more she had out there to give.
When we return, a gruesome story of sex in the city.
This case, I believe, absolutely was premeditated. And he was overwhelmed with the fact that he had to support 2 children.
A young Philadelphia woman, 5 months pregnant, a reluctant father-to-be, a volatile union with tragic consequences for Latoya Figueroa, number 3 on our list. Latoya Figueroa was acquainted with tragedy. When Latoya was 4 years old, police discovered her mother's body on a Philadelphia street. Her throat had been cut.
I get a phone call one day saying that Latoya's mother was found dead. And I couldn't believe it.
Police never found the killer. By her mid-teens, Latoya herself became a mother.
I used to be so hard on her because I was older and she was so young having a child. But you look back and you go, she was a damn good mom. For only being 15 years old, she was a really good mom.
Then, in 2003, when she was 22, the single mother hooked up with 25-year-old Stephen Poche.
She'd known him for years. They all went to high school together, apparently, and they were friends.
He was very antisocial, did not really talk to anybody. He was definitely just very weird as far as his interaction with people.
The relationship between Latoya and Stephen was complicated.
When him and Latoya started dating, him and his ex-girlfriend had broken up, but he was still seeing his ex-girlfriend without telling Latoya. Then the girl got pregnant, and then Latoya got pregnant.
He wanted my daughter to have an abortion. My daughter says no. My family don't believe in abortion.
According to published reports, despite their issues, on July 18, 2003, Stephen agreed to take Latoya to her 5-month prenatal checkup.
They did make it to the doctor's home. They left the office, and we know that they bought some lunch or some food in the Southwest Philadelphia neighborhood where they live. Then, at that point, she made that last cell phone call. We don't know after that where she went.
After her co-workers hadn't seen her, after no one could raise her on her cell phone, after she failed to pick up her 7-year-old daughter, her family got very suspicious.
Latoya's father confronted Poche.
And he said, oh, I don't know why y'all blaming me for. I don't know where your daughter's at. You know, she left the doctor, and that was after that. I didn't see her. She left, she must be angry.
3 days later, on July 21st, Latoya's family reported her missing. The police took a closer look at Stephen Poche.
He came into the office at my request, and he came in with his mother. So I asked him some questions. He deflected to his mother, which I thought was a little odd. My superiors basically asked me early on, what do you think about this investigation? I said, she's definitely missing, and I think there's foul play involved.
As the story gripped the city, Poche appeared on a local news program on the condition his face be concealed.
I had just given her some money to go baby shopping. I went to the bank before we went to get something to eat and gave her money to go baby shopping.
He always changes his stories.
Stephen Poche was not initially forthcoming about the 2 pregnancies. It wasn't until a second interview. He says, yeah, initially I was overwhelmed with the fact of having 2 babies at one time, but I quickly got over it.
Philadelphia rapper Beanie Siegel started a reward fund, hoping to find Latoya. By August, several weeks into Latoya's disappearance, the fund reached $100,000. That's when detectives received a bizarre lead from Walter Myatt, an acquaintance of Stephen Poche.
He had told us that he was contacted by Mr. Poche's, and that Mr. Poche's was looking for a van and body bag, that he could move a body, and could this individual help him out.
Maya definitely gained the respect of the investigators because he could have just shunned the request of Poche and never said anything more. He could have maintained his street credibility with, I don't talk to the police. But he saw this guy Poche as a manipulator, untrusting, unworthy guy to be upheld by such a heinous crime.
Around midnight on August 20th, police followed Myatt to a vacant lot in nearby Chester, Pennsylvania.
Poche stops and parks his car. He gets into the van with Mr. Myatt. And then he directs Mr. Myatt to this vacant lot and back to the hole in the fence where the body is. The Poche's evidently went in and he wanted to attempt to move the body, but it was so decayed at that time and decomposed that he wasn't able to.
According to police reports, Stephen Poche was wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a .45 caliber gun.
And we feel as though he was actually armed because he was going to kill this witness. But I think Poche's became spooked, and he went and he ended up back in his vehicle. And when he's leaving the scene, he was stopped by local police officers and arrested.
Police charged Poche with Latoya's murder and with killing their unborn child.
After Poche was caught standing over Latoya's body, he still denied having done anything to her. He played stupid the whole time, and it wasn't until some of our seasoned investigators got him down here in the homicide unit and said, listen, all that baloney, look, we're not going for it. And then he came up with the best story he could, that they were involved in an argument, and he choked her, and she died after he choked her.
Despite his confession, Poche pled not guilty at his arraignment. The case went to trial in October of 2006. Stephen Poche was found guilty of murdering Latoya and her unborn child and sentenced to 2 life terms.
What gets me the most upset is that he didn't even think of how this was going to affect Ajane. Like, that's her. She has no mom.
A lot of people ask me why I didn't go for the death penalty. To me, death penalty is too easy. I'd rather put him in jail. I'm happy with that he's got to sit there every day and suffer.
Coming up, a teenager goes missing in one of the most twisted family dramas imaginable.
She was held against her will, year after year, rape after rape, until she bore 7 children.